Hey guys, Fox here, and today we're going to be talking about the most forgotten ultramodern spring football to NFL player success story in Khalil Davis, the former defensive tackle of the Birmingham Stallions. Now, Khalil Davis is somebody who I think a lot of us kind of forget about when we talk about these USFL, XFL, UFL to NFL success stories, right? We all remember guys like Cavante Turpin, Brandon Aubrey, Daniel Wellen, and of course guys like now we're seeing with like a Jake Bates. But Khalil Davis is somebody we've kind of forgotten about, right? Even this past couple weeks, we've seen guys like Jalen Redmond and Dondre Tillman end up having really good games for teams like the Broncos and the Vikings. But Khalil Davis has been doing this for like 2 years now, well, a year and a half pretty much, yet nobody seems to really talk about it. So we're going to be talking about Khalil Davis and giving him his flowers that he definitely deserves as being a successful spring football to NFL success story. Now, Khalil Davis' story starts with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're just jumping right into his NFL career, right? He was a really fast player at the combine, right? His 4.75 was one of the fastest time for a D lineman. And he went to Nebraska and he ended up being a sixth round pick by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, he would end up making the roster, but he only ended up playing in 2 games total. So he was, one of those guys who's kind of, an inactive most of the time type of player. But he was still a part of that team and ended up becoming a Super Bowl champion because of that. As that team in 2020 did, of course, go on to beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. That was pretty much it for him, right? After that, he would end up being released, during his second season with the Buccaneers in 2021. He would get picked up by the Colts and the Steelers, but he basically had, no real game time. He only appeared in literally, 6 snaps in the one game appearance he had for the Colts that year. And he would go on to become a practice squad guy until, of course, after 2022 with the Rams. So overall, when you look at his stats, there's not much to say, right? This was somebody who only ended up playing in 25% of the snaps of the 2 games he was in his rookie season, got far less snaps his second season, as well as being released from the team that drafted him, and was essentially one of those guys who everybody thought would be essentially out of, the visual, NFL, essentially an active roster spot guy, right? That he would be out of football for all intents and purposes. He might stick around as a practice squad guy, but especially when your third year is spent just in the practice squad, it looked to be over for him. Well, it wasn't. And that was because of the Birmingham Stallions, right? The Birmingham Stallions gave him an opportunity in 2023, and he would definitely be a solid player for the team. Look, let's not, try and make it something like it's not. It's not like he was a superstar player for them by any means. It was not like he was, the mainstay defensive player, right? He finished 10th on the team in overall tackles in 2023. And while he did have a sack in the postseason, it's not like he was somebody who, was like a Keava Tizino for the Maulers who made a huge name for himself in the postseason, along with the regular season or something. He was simply put an overall solid player. One of those guys where if you were a Stallions fan, yes, you knew who he was. But if you were an overall more casual spring football fan, you probably didn't know who he was. Again, he was a part of a Stallions team that would go on to finish 8-2 in the regular season, would go on to beat one of the best modern spring football teams we've seen in the New Orleans Breakers, and then of course beat the Maulers 28-12 in the championship game. He won a championship. So he won his second overall pro football championship, this time a USFL championship. And after the season, he would end up being released from his contract on July 27th to sign with an NFL team, which ended up being the Houston Texans. Again, when you look at his stats in the USFL, it's not like this was somebody who was a, superstar like I mentioned, right? He appeared in 9 games during the regular season, 29 tackles, not like he had a ton. He had just a little over 3 a game. Did have 1 sack, and he did have 1 TFL essentially every 3 games. And his postseason did improve. His postseason saw 2 TFLs and a sack, which nearly matched his season totals in just 2 games. But again, it's not like this is somebody everybody expected to be, one of those immediate roster guys. Yet in 2023, we saw 2 players make the 53-man roster initially, and that was, of course, Brandon Aubrey and Khalil Davis. So yes, he made the 53-man roster for the Houston Texans, and well, he made the most of it. He has been a very solid mainstay on the rotation for the D-line for the past year and a half now. His first year with the Texans, of course, he appeared in 15 total games, so far more than he did in either of his seasons in the NFL previously, and he would end up actually getting a decent amount of snaps. In 2023, he would end up being in 41% of the snaps that he could have been in, while being a starter 1 time. He only ended up getting 2 sacks, but he did have a forced fumble and fumble recovery, a couple pass deflections, and overall 32 total tackles while hitting the quarterback 6 times. Solid numbers. Again, he was a rotational defensive lineman, not a starter, but he did appear in both playoff games and had a very sizable presence in those games. He actually saw his snap count rise in the playoffs, being in 49% of their snaps against the Browns and 38% of his snaps against the Ravens. Now, it's not like he was insane in those games, though his game against the Browns was actually really solid. He ended up having 5 total tackles with a TFL, which is pretty damn solid while only playing half the snaps. Now, he didn't have necessarily a great performance next week statistically wise. He only had 1 tackle. But the fact that he actually appeared in those games was a big deal. And he was able to get his biggest single APY contract, which is average per year, with his 1-year contract in this past offseason where he signed for $1.65 million, which also had a $350,000 signing bonus to it. Pretty damn good. Oh, which essentially means that over the past 2 years now, his APY was better than it ever had been, right? His average amount earned per year has been higher these past 2 years than any year during his career, including his rookie contract deal. So he has made a lot more money than he pretty much has ever had, especially if he ends up playing this full season, appearing in every game. He should be making that full $1.65 million, which will be by far the most he's earned in a single season. As if he ends up earning the whole contract, he will have earned more in this 1 year than any other previous year times 2, which is absolutely impressive. In fact, if he ends up getting the full $1.65 million, he will actually pretty much get right on line with how much he's earned the entire rest of his career. That's all because of spring football. He was able to parlay his time with the Birmingham Stallions to an opportunity with the Texans, and now he's here. Now, while he hasn't necessarily been statistically as good as he was last year, a lot of that is because he is seeing a bit less overall snap counts, right? He's seeing 10% less snaps than he did last year, but during that time, he's still putting up somewhat similar numbers, right? Through the first 5 games, he does only have 6 total tackles, but he already does have a sack, he does have 2 TFLs and 1 QB hit. And this past week against Buffalo, he was a really solid player against the Bills. So maybe with that performance, we'll see a bit more game time in the next couple of weeks. But again, what's important about this is that this is the overall success story you want to see. Now, yes, some people are going to say, is that really what you want to see, a guy being a rotational piece? The important thing to know is that with spring football to NFL success stories, right, we keep thinking about these special teams players, right? Kavontae Turpin, while yes, he's had, some success as a receiver this year especially, he was mainly brought in as a returner, right? There's only so many returners, right? Just like kicker and punter are really the most exclusive positions in football, there's only 1 punter and 1 kicker on a roster. And so when you see guys like Daniel Wellen, like Brandon Aubrey, like Jake Bates make those spots, they're expected to be at least solid players. While we didn't expect Aubrey to become the best kicker in the league or at least one of the 3 best, the fact is that this is what you actually want to see a spring football success story. You want to see one of these guys playing a more, on the field, offense or defensive type of position. Now, you might want him to be a bit better overall and, produce more than Khalil Davis has. Again, Khalil Davis is making more money than he's done at any point in his career. So that already is a massive W for him. So when you see something like that, that's a success story. Again, he might not be doing the same amount statistically now, but there's still a lot of season left to be played. And the fact is, this is somebody who we can't forget about. Yes, we've seen these guys now getting some action in recent weeks from the UFL, USFL, and all that. But Khalil Davis is one of those guys who is one of those more original, ultra-modern spring football players, right? Dating back to 2022. He is a guy who is playing a true, offense-defensive position, not a specialist. And he is a serviceable player. If you're a Texans fan, you know who this guy is. So I just want us all to remember Khalil Davis as being one of those guys who really has opened the door for spring football to NFL success in this post-XFL 2.0 era. And so I just want to make this video for him, make sure everybody recognizes that this guy is a big deal for the overall success of spring football, and that we don't forget about him when we're talking about guys like Brandon Aubrey, like Kavontae Turpin, like potentially Jake Bates and all them. So that'll be it. This has been Zomfox. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. I've got a pretty fun video coming out later this week unless we get some UFL news regarding AAF to UFL players. So that should be a pretty fun video that was requested by a fan. And so we got a couple other stuff. If you've been a fan of the channel for a while, think about becoming a channel member for as little as 99 cents a month. You'll get an exclusive video every month, exclusive emojis, and a few other benefits. And as always, guys, have a great night.